All right, so much art history, never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum, and we're going to look at Titian. All right, moving on. I got a story time for you. Do you remember the Minotaur and the Labyrinth? Minotaur is inside the labyrinth because he is an embarrassment to King Minos, right? The Minotaur, yeah. There's some sort of a deal, and I don't know why this deal is there, but Athens has to send seven men or seven young men and seven young women to Crete to go into the labyrinth and as a sacrifice to the Minotaur. Athens becomes weary of this deal, so especially Theseus. Theseus is a prince, and he doesn't have to go, but he wants to end this. So he takes the place of one of the sacrifices. Theseus is a hero. Theseus has just arrived. He's pretending to be one of the slaves. Ariadne, the princess of Crete, just falls in love with him. She takes pity on him and doesn't want to see him be sacrificed. So she visits him in his jail cell and she gives him a sword and a ball of string. And the sword is to fight and kill the Minotaur. The ball of string is to find his way back out. So as he walks into the labyrinth, he unrolls the ball of string and then he can just follow the string to find his way out. So he kills the Minotaur. He finds his way out, and when he exits the labyrinth, she is there waiting for him, and they are truly in love with each other. He loves her, she loves him, but she has betrayed her father, and so she has to get out of there because he will punish her probably by killing her. So they both board a boat and they sail away. Dionysus is the god of wine. He's also called Bacchus. Dionysus is the Greek name, Bacchus is the Roman name. And Dionysus visits Theseus during the night on the boat. And Dionysus tells Theseus, look, I've seen your girlfriend. I know you have feelings for her, but I want her. All right. So you're going to have to give her to me. And when a god tells you that, then you can't really go against the god because they're either going to kill you or make your life absolutely horrible. So Theseus has to concede, even though he loves Ariadne. So the plan is that Theseus and Ariadne are going to go and visit an island, and it's unknowing to Ariadne, it's the island where Dionysus lives, and Theseus is going to abandon her on the island, and then Dionysus will rescue her. That's the plan. And so this is our next painting, the meeting of Bacchus and Ariadne. This photograph gives you a sense of how large this painting is. Okay, so Theseus has just left Ariadne. She is on the shore and she is heartbroken. So is Theseus. Like Theseus didn't want to do this, and she is absolutely heartbroken. She doesn't understand that Theseus had no choice. She thinks he just left her. She is very upset. In fact, if you look behind her, you can see Theseus' ship sailing away. It is at this moment that she hears a commotion behind her and turns around, and there is the entourage of Bacchus, or Dionysus, the god of wine. I've talked about him before, but he often has an entourage around him. Because he's the god of wine, there's lots of wine around him. And so everybody hangs around him because he gets them drunk. So basically, we have a bunch of drunk revelers with him. And are drunks quiet or loud? Yeah, they are quite loud. It also becomes love at first sight. Bacchus is in love with her, and then she falls in love with Bacchus. And at first, she is wary of him, but he promises to make her a constellation. So apparently, that's good enough to disregard any red flags that she sees. Like I said, Bacchus, the god of wine, always portrayed with an entourage, often portrayed on a I don't even want to say a chariot. It's a chariot, but it's almost like a parade float. In fact, That's what I'll call it from now. It's the Bacchus Parade, all right, where it's just a bunch of drunks hanging around the big parade float. The ancient book by Ovid, he is described as riding a chariot pulled by tigers. Now, tigers is a very rare animal during the Renaissance. There's not many tigers around in Europe. Somebody would have to go and explore over to another world and bring back exotic animals. But, it's such a long journey, and the ships are not as seaworthy as they are now. And there's no planes, there's no trains, so, even if they are able to procure wild animals, many of them don't make the return trip. But these exotic animals are very rare, and oftentimes artists don't know how to draw or paint them. And it just so happens that Bacchus knows, or the client that commissioned this has a menagerie. A menagerie is a collection of animals. It's like a tiny private zoo. You're a rich person, and what do you have? If once you pay your bills, you have a bunch of extra money. You can buy art. Well, you can also buy exotic animals and have them around your gardens. So he has some cheetahs. So Titian, the artist, is able to observe the cheetahs, and the client also wanted cheetahs in his picture because that's part of his menagerie. So they switched it from tigers to cheetahs. We also have a dog in the lower left-hand corner, and the dog is barking. But you guys know what a dog is a symbol of, right? It's a symbol of fidelity and faithfulness. So it's often, in paintings of lovers, you'll have a dog in there. Also, this is a late addition, so it's possible that the client wanted a dog added. And that's the frustrating thing about working on a commission, that you agree on one thing and then the client changes their mind. They want something different, or they want additions, they want things taken out. And we have very complicated poses here. It's very much like the Laocoon, and we have this awkward jump by Bacchus out of the chariot. And then we have this guy who is being surrounded by snakes, or has these snakes slithering all over him. And the sculpture of Laocoon had just been discovered recently when this painting was made. So it's most likely a reference to that as well. All right, we got Sleeping Venus. Now, I want you guys to remember this painting. It won't be on this exact painting won't be on the test, but I just want you, this is a very important painting. This was painted by Giorgione, but he died before he could finish it. So it was finished by Titian. Titian painted the background of this painting. Before taking this class, I might imagine that, what you thought of, famous paintings and art, maybe you would have thought of like it's a naked lady, a reclining naked lady. That's a common trope in art history. This is the first one, right? This is the first time somebody painted a naked lady reclining, and it's a bit absurd. Here she is. What is she? They bring her mattress out on the field and the blankets, and it's just outside sleeping naked. It's really absurd, this painting. But in the scope of all like nude female reclining, it is like very common to have something like this. Anyways, it is also in the tradition of the nude female in art. It started with the Greeks, but this is the first time we have the reclining version of it. And she is in the Venus Pudica pose, that she is covering up her genitalia. Then we come to Venus of Urbino. I showed you the previous painting in order to prepare you for this one. And this is one done by Titian. Now, Titian worked on the previous one, so you can see that he was absolutely influenced by that previous painting. And it's almost the same painting, this reclining nude pose, this reclining nude woman that is covering up her genitalia. We don't know who she is. Calling it a Venus, just like you called the Venus of Willendorf, like there's no way that Venus of Willendorf could have been a Venus, because Venus is a Greek goddess. But we don't know who this is, and it is okay for pagan imagery to be nude because it's pagan. right? If this was a true woman, if this was a real woman posing nude, then there would be all kinds of a scandal about it. So to call her Venus is to dispel any of that conspiracy or problems. One of the things that makes this different is that direct gaze, which I'll get into in just a second. Some art historians will look at this and say she says that she is modest, she is covering her privates, and then other art historians are saying that she is pleasuring herself. So I tell you this because it is common for art historians to look at the same picture and come to different conclusions. All right, and then I want to talk to that male gaze. And this idea of the male gaze started in the 1960s, and it's a part of feminist ideology where they were looking at films, and it's mostly directed towards cinematography, but then it's been applied to art. The male gaze is a sexualized way of portraying women. By objectifying women, the male gaze represents women through the sexual desires of heterosexual male viewers. It depicts the female body and the personality as an object for men to view, own, and conquer, instead of wondering, what she's like as a person, or is she a good singer, or can she tell stories, or is she intelligent, or we don't know, we don't even bother with any of those because we're just focused on her body. But what I kind of want to refer to is that these two are the beginnings of a long tradition of the nude reclining female. And then the other thing I want to point out with this is that the Venus of Urbino is looking back at us, whereas the previous one, she is unaware of our presence. It's almost like we're hiding behind the bushes and looking at her. It's a voyeur type thing, but this image of the woman looking back at us and not caring, then it shows it's a very sexual thing. We have, compositionally, the red is repeated, and the white sheet represents purity. She holds roses and flowers. That is a reference for romance in the relationship, and the dog is a reference for loyalty. So these are symbols of marriage. Her maidservants are desperately looking for something to put on her, so to finding clothes for her. But the main thing I want to get out of this is that this is the first image of a long line of history of the reclining female nude that we go all the way up through, even through modern art. But this image is repeated over and over, all the way up through modern art. This is going to be the first time in history that we have a reaction against something. The first time in art history. Art history from the beginning of time till now, the Renaissance, has been a progression that artists get better and better and better. We had a couple of times where we went, back in our skills, like with the late antiquity and then the medieval era and Gothic era. But as time went along, artists got better at making things, or it's just a natural progression to improve, and they just get more skilled. Almost never has it been a reaction to the previous style, but we have that here. The artists are consciously reacting to the style that's around. They're looking at the current style and they say, we don't like that. We're going to do something different. And this is mannerism. All right. It's the first time artists do that. And we will see this happen again and again and again as we go out through this semester. There will always then be a backlash. So we have this, and I will illustrate a pendulum that swings back and forth as artists then react to each other. And artists react to the previous group of artists. So, this is an intense reaction to the perfection of the High Renaissance. The Renaissance was so perfect, there was nowhere to go but to do something really different. With mannerism, something is wrong. Something's wrong in these two pictures. If you look at the one on the left, does it look like something's wrong with her body? All right. And by the way, does anybody know who that is? That's a goddess. Demeter is the goddess of, yeah. And is that the Roman name for Artemis? All right. So Artemis, and I thought it was Diana, but all right. So yeah, Demeter and Artemis is the god of hunting. So if you want to have a good hunt, you would pray to Artemis, and then you would have a good hunt. All right. So what is the attribute that led you to believe this? Right, the bow and arrow. Right. But look at her proportions. Look at the anatomy. Does it look like her neck is like twisted around like a doll's head? The shoulder is in the wrong place, and the hips are like so. The hips and the legs look like a profile, and then the back look like it's turned like towards us. We see more of the back, and then the head is turned around. It just looks like somebody's taken like a Barbie doll and kind of twisted it all around, and it doesn't make any sense. All right, and then on the right, the figures, and I'll discuss the painting on the right in more detail in a little bit. Mannerism is also called the late Renaissance, but it's a period of art that came out of the high Renaissance, heavily influenced by the Renaissance. Their religion and mythology is kind of the same, but the way they go about it is different. And the term mannerism comes from maniera, which means style. All right, so one of the main ways to identify mannerism is poses that look like a broken neck or their arms are out of joint. So one mannerist wrote to another mannerist, and he wrote this. Listen to this quote: "Take a right hand and put it on a left arm." Unquote. So these mannerists are purposefully doing things awkward. There's a reason for it. Another way to identify mannerism is distorted figures. All right, so the distorted figures was a popular theme in mannerism. If you look at the painting on the left, that is a convex mirror. That's a mirror that kind of bows out and gives this fisheye lens look. That was a popular type of mirror at the time, and the Mannerists loved doing self-portraits in that convex mirror. On the right, we have this Madonna and Child, which we will look at in more detail later on, but her figure is definitely distorted, and that's done on purpose. All right, another thing that Mannerists did is they had an unusual approach to traditional subject matter. What is the subject of this painting? Yeah, that looks like a butcher shop. You have a cow's head, you have a side of beef, you have all these meats hanging. It looks like a butcher shop, absolutely. And you can even see the butcher shop in the background on the right. All right, it looks like a butcher shop. That is not the subject of this painting. All right, the subject of this painting is back here. And if you zoom in back here, it is a religious subject. It is Mary and Joseph on a donkey with Jesus going to or leaving Bethlehem or going to Bethlehem. But it is a religious topic. All right. It is not the butcher shop that it appears to be. All right. That is a purposeful decision that the artist made. And I could easily imagine that this artist gets commissioned, hey, I want to commission you a painting. Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds great. And the guy says, oh, I want you to paint Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem. It's like, oh, I don't really want to paint that. So he paints it real small on the corner. Another characteristic of mannerism is unnatural skin tones. And then the big one is awkward, unnatural, impossible, and uncomfortable poses. If the artist uses models, these models look very uncomfortable to hold a pose like that for any length of time. And this guy too. All right, I got a 360 view of the Madonna with the long neck. I just want you to see the context of the room in which she's. So if we just look around, that gives you a sense of, come on, how large this artwork is. And then, all right, so let's move on and look at Madonna with the long neck. I really like this painting, and I'll go over a couple reasons why I like this painting in a minute. Her anatomy is erroneous. Her anatomy is wrong. It's not realistic. And that's what the Mannerists were moving against. Renaissance artists worked so hard to get everything perfect, but the Mannerists just wanted to do something. They wanted to be more expressive. And realism is boring. Realism is, maybe exciting in that it's a technical challenge to get it to look, to get your drawing or painting to look exactly like what's in front of you. that's a challenge, but ever since the camera is like, just take a picture of it. Why do you want to, why not express yourself? Show, if you draw something that looks exactly like how you see it, you're not really putting any of yourself into that. You're not, like, if everybody drew exactly what was in front of them, then everybody's drawing would be the same. All right. So it would have no meaning to it. It's just what we see. So these artists are trying to be a lot more expressive. So she has a tiny head and these really large hips. Christ's arm looks dislocated. And look at how long he is. That is not like a regular baby right there. There is a wonderful, graceful, curving line that goes from her head down her body and into her knee. And for those of you watching this on video, it goes down the head and through the body and down that knee. There's a wonderful curve. You know what? I need to draw that with a line. I'll do that in a second. There is a second curve, right, that goes down this way. And then there's the curve of Christ, like the arm goes up her arm, and then her arm cradles around his shoulder. And there's this wonderful curve that goes across here into to her other knee. Those are beautiful lines that are fun to follow. That's one of the things I love about this artwork. So I kind of relate to the Mannerists, because in my own artwork, I like to draw. I draw a lot of stuff realistically. So in these drawings, I am drawing exactly from the photograph. I try to make it look as close to the photograph as possible. But I find that to be boring, right? It's a challenge to make it look like the photograph, but it's boring. And so these are some of my later works where I just had some fun with the shapes of this. And I just realized when I was talking to my other class that the line on this guy looks a lot like the line on the Madonna with the long neck. I didn't consciously make that decision, but it could have been in there in my mind when I was, because I just love that line that goes across like that. All right. Renaissance artists like Leonardo had perfected naturalism, which is realism. Mannerism is a reaction to that. And the illusionism that made Renaissance art look so realistic is now being used to distort the figures. And distorting the figure for a graceful effect that really that reality could not offer. And then also her fingers are impossibly boneless. So they look a little bit weird, right? And really long. All right, we are moving on to Venus, Cupid, Folly, and Time. Okay, so this painting right here, look at the awkward poses of Venus and Cupid. And if we look at the angularness, so this artist, instead of having these flowing body like the previous artist, this artist chose to do these very angular poses, and they are very uncomfortable. And look at how Cupid really sticks his butt out, and then the angles of the legs and the shoulders and the heads, like none of this looks comfortable at all. And I want to remind you who these two people are. So Venus and Cupid, Aphrodite and Eros. So Aphrodite is the goddess of, what is she the goddess of? Beauty, yes. And what else? Yes, and marriage and love. All right, she's the goddess of beauty, marriage, and love. And Eros is the god of love. What is the relationship between Eros and Aphrodite, or Cupid and Venus? Does anybody know? What's the relationship between them? Venus and Cupid. They are related. Right. Venus is the mother of Eros. And if we look closely, is that not awkward? All right. There's a little bit of tongue there. Not only is it an awkward pose, but what they're doing is quite awkward. And then, like, the attribute of Venus, the reason why we know it's Venus is that she is holding the golden apple. And I told you that story of the golden apple, that this is the apple that started the Trojan War. Above her is Father Time, and he, as time moves along, it uncovers truths. So he is pulling back this curtain, he's pulling back this blanket to uncover the truth. Down in the lower right of the painting, we have these two masks, and the masks are a symbol of deceit. And this child here, this really weird child who seems a little bit mischievous, is about to throw a bunch of flowers onto Venus and Cupid. And he has, this is folly, right? Do you guys know what folly is? It's like a foolish action, or it's a foolish way of life. And then behind him, my notes say, what the hell is that? All right, she has a child's face. In her hand, she is holding a honeycomb, and she has lion's legs. She has a tail that comes around, and at the end of the tail is a scorpion's stinger. So I ask again, what the hell is that? All right, this weird creature. There's the scorpion stinger. And that scorpion stinger denotes pain, and the honeycomb denotes pleasure. Again, there's Father Time. He has an hourglass on his back as time goes. Over here on the left side is syphilis. And so we're going to get a close look at syphilis. There she is. All right. So syphilis is a consequence of folly and love, like foolish love. It's a consequence of pleasure of love. And love accompanied by envy and deceit and inconsistency is foolish, and lovers will discover its folly in time. That's the whole message of this painting. So if you're hiding things and there's inconsistency, the relationship is doomed to fail, and you just might get syphilis, which was a problem at the time. We will talk more about this, about syphilis, this semester. This is part sex ed class as well. So I'm going to show you a huge difference in style between the Renaissance and the Mannerism. On the left, we have a Renaissance painting by Raphael, and look how nice it is. Look how well composed it is. And we have that triangular composition. We have the very pleasant background, and it's so quiet and nice. And then in the Mannerist painting, we have such chaos and weirdness and these harsh angles and just like what is going on, and we don't really know, and it's just so strange. And that is a big difference between Renaissance and Mannerism. All right, so in Florence, I don't know if I talked about the Vasari. Yes, when we talked about the Medici, I talked about the Vasari corridor. And so that is the elevated walkway between the Palazzo Vecchio and the Medici Palace that the Medici would walk and avoid the common folk, because they were better than the common folk. And they would also, it was a way to avoid assassination. The corridor also, it goes through some buildings. And one of the buildings that it passes through is the Santa Felicita Church. And here is the Vasari corridor up here. And then here is the church. And if you go into that door right down in the bottom there, just to the right, you see that window. In that little room just to the right is where our artwork is going to be. It's just like when we went into the big cathedral and we looked to the right and there was the Pietà. So same thing, where there's this little chapel to the right. But before we get there, I just want to show this, the Vasari corridor went through this chapel. And so the Medici had their own little room to participate in the ceremonies going on in the church. All right. And so we can see that room up there. And just below it is the Capponi Chapel, where our next artwork is. Here is our artwork, the Entombment of Christ, or the Capponi altarpiece. Again, we have these awkward, unnatural, impossible, and uncomfortable poses. And then we also have a lack of illusion of space. The Renaissance artists gave us all that space. Before the Renaissance, all that space was crammed flat, and we was like a department store display. But now the Renaissance opened up all that space, and the Mannerist says, no, we don't want that space anymore. So everything is crammed to the front, and we don't even really know where they are. There's a little cloud in the background, but the sky doesn't look like a sky. So this is very strange. And then these weird poses, especially the guy down at the bottom his neck isn't really in the right place. His neck is pushed way forward. It doesn't, the anatomy doesn't quite match up. And then there's this, how much would you say that guy weighs? He's like a medium build, all right? So he's maybe like almost like 150 to 200 pounds. And then we have a dead body that he's holding up, maybe another 150 to 200 pounds. And then does it look like there's any weight on his feet? It's all much like the Sandro Botticelli Venus, where everybody looks weightless. And so we had this weird sense of weightlessness in this painting. There's also a problem with what is this a painting of? What scene is depicted here? And so some artists are asking that question, or some art historians are asking that question, like what scene is this? And other art historians are saying there's the clues that are normally in paintings like this are all missing. For example, is this the throne of mercy? No, it's not the throne of mercy, because it doesn't have God and the Holy Spirit. It has the Son, but usually the throne of mercy looks a little bit different than this. Is this the deposition? This is where they take Christ off of the cross. And no, it's not, because the normal deposition would have a cross and it would have a ladder in it. All right, is this a pietà? And no, it's not a pietà, because he's not on her lap. He's on the back of this other guy. And is this a lamentation? And no, it's not a lament. There's not enough grief in this. Like, nobody really looks like they're grieving. They're not in the grieving poses. So it's not a lamentation. The other question is, is he about to be lifted onto her lap, or are they lifting him off of her lap? There's no way to tell. And is this an entombment? And that's the closest thing that they can figure, because it's the closest, it looks closest to an entombment, but there's no tomb here like there usually is in an entombment painting. So it's not really an entombment either. So, but this is what they settled on, that it is the title of this, not by the artist, but that art historians have put onto this, is the entombment of Christ. Moving on, we're going to go to Venice. What is the unique thing about Venice? How is Venice different than most places in the world? Right, the canals, right, the water. So here we have, it looks like a floating church, all right, but we have this church on this island here, and we're going to go inside this church and take a look at an artwork. Magnificent. I'm going to take the guy's comments out. And so, all right, so he's walked up to the altar, and there's a painting to the left, and then there's a painting to the right. And the painting to the right is our painting that we're going to look at, the Last Supper. And then he's going to walk around to the back of it to give you a sense of, we're now behind the altar, looking up at the painting of the Last Supper on the left. All right, so I'm going to stop the video there. And all right, there's our Last Supper. So this is the Last Supper. It's the same story as that of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. You remember how he was Christ was in the center, looked like a triangle. He had three groups of threes to the left and groups of threes to the right. It was all balanced. And if you could take an imaginary line down the middle, it was equal on both sides. But here in this one, it's much different. Like the Christ is not, while he's close to the center of the picture, but he's not the center of the disciples. And we have the table is now going back into space, and then it's mostly dark. We can see how dark this painting is. And the only lights seem to be coming from Christ's head and the lamp above. And he has these like angels flying up above. But we can compare these two paintings where, and again, this is such a Mannerist painting. We have such chaos going on that it's not so nice and neat as the Renaissance. Renaissance is just so pleasant. It's so nice. Everything is organized. Whereas in the Mannerism, we have such chaos. All right. Well, that will finish us up for this part. We have one more section of chapter 22 to do. All right. Are there any questions about anything at all?